Chavre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. We're more than 3 weeks, Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Pinchas, Shabbos Mevorchim Menachem Ov. And as usual, we have to think about the thought of the week and what are the messages that Hashem is sending us today. Before we start, since the war started, we gave tzedakah. We're giving tzedakah, schus from tzedakah, g'delet tzedakah, shemakarev segula, Mashiach should come now. We're also going to say a prayer, which is directly connected to what we're going to be talking about today. And that's what we say in the middle of Lefichach, before Shema, before like Kabbonis, every morning. Ashreinu mateichel keinu umanohim geiraleinu umayavo yavo 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 Yerushaseinu. Fortunate are we, how good is our portion, how pleasant our lot, and how beautiful our heritage. So over here we have a word called chalkeinu, our lot, our portion, geraleinu, our lot, and Yerushaseinu, our heritage. In this week's Parsha, interestingly, there is something which is talking about a communal level, in a certain sense, but also a particular level. And that is, we speak about how the land will be divided amongst the nation. As the Pasuk says, Ach b'goyrel yecholik es haaretz. That will be through a lot. So it speaks about the concept of goyrel. But there's also the idea of Yerushaseinu, the halachas of nachlas, the laws of inheritance, which is a mitzvah from the Torah. One of the 613 mitzvahs are connected to the laws of inheritance. Now, the reason I wanted to speak about it this week is because when you get a double message, both the idea of the connection to the land in Ach b'goyrel yechalek es haaretz, and also the laws of inheritance, so it's a double message, both on a communal level, a nation building level, Ach b'goyrel yechalek es haaretz, and also on a personal level, the story of the Bnei Tzlofchad. That's where we learn the laws of the inheritance of a parent to a child, of a father to the children. So let's begin with the story of Bnei Tzlofchad, the daughters of Tzlofchad. I'm going to mention Rashi, even though first I was going to talk about the concept of Chassidus, about how there's Goyrel, how there's Yerusha, there's also Matana. There's what to talk about, we might have to leave it for another time. But this time I decided we're going to speak very practical and relevant, and a message which is very pertinent and important. The Pasuk says, when it starts talking about the laws of inheritance, the daughters of Tzlofchad came to Ben Chefer, Ben Gilad, Ben Machir, Ben Menashe, Lemishpaches, Menashe, Ben Yosef. So the Pasuk says, the daughters of Tzlofchad, son of Chefer, son of Gilad, son of Machir, son of Menashe, to the family of Menashe ben Yosef. So it's highly unusual. We should go back one generation, another generation, another generation, another generation, another generation, to the great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Yosef. So Rashi will bavon that. We'll soon see this. But before that, I just want to say the general point is that they told Moshe, whatever the question was brought before Moshe Rabbeinu, that Tzlofchad had no sons, and they didn't know the law concerning a situation or a family where there was no son if there is an inheritor. And they say the famous words that our father did not have any children, and Loma Yigora Shem Avinu Miteich Mishpachtei. Why should he lose it out? And it shouldn't go over to his children. And then the law is that it goes to the daughters. Now, Rashi over here, and I'll tell you the truth, this Rashi alone is what inspired me to focus on this subject. Rashi says over here two things, but I'm just going to say the first thing. Lemishpachos Menashe ben Yosef, Loma Nemar, Valikvar Nemar ben Menashe, which that itself is a question. Why do we keep on going back generation to generation? Which Rashi will soon deal with that. But in particular, if we already said Menashe, why do we have to mention Ben Yosef? Elo loy melecha Yosef chibe v'sa'aretz. Yosef held the land precious. Shenema v'alisem es atzmoisai v'goymer. He asked that his bones should be taken out of Egypt to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. Uvnoisav chivku es ha'aretz. And his daughters, his great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughters, held the land precious. Shenema telon lonu achuza. Give us a possession. Okay. Now this is unbelievable. An unbelievable lesson. And an instruction for me, you, and every parent. Everyone, without a question, if asked what is the most important thing in their life, what is the most valuable thing in their life, what is the thing that they don't stop thinking about? The children, the children, the children. Sometimes we invest, but we don't see so many all the time return on the investment. Here comes this Rashi and tells us that because by Yosef HaTzadik, it was embedded in the DNA that he loved Eretz Yisrael, there was an essential bond between him and the land. Therefore, it was transferred from generation to generation to generation to generation to generation. That his great-great-great-great-granddaughters wanted the land. Not because it was prime real estate, not because they wanted money, not because this was some Yerusha story. They wanted it because they loved the land. They felt an essential connection to the land. And if they didn't have their connection to the land, they would be lacking. So this is the message that Rashi says. We'll get back to it. We find something very similar, that the nature, if you talk about the character traits of parents, go over to the children. As is well known, is when Avram wanted a wife for Yitzchak, the pasuk in Chayei Sarah says, "Vazbiacha b'Hashem elikei hashamayim v'elikei haaretz asher lo yisikach isha livni mibnoi saknani asher anochi yoshev b'kirbei." Avram tells Eliezer, don't take a daughter-in-law. I don't want a daughter-in-law, a wife for my child Yitzchak, from the Canaaniim. Ki el arzi vel meladati telech v'lokachta isha livni Yitzchak. I want you to go to my land, where I used to live, Choron, where my family lives, and from there take a wife. So all the Mefarshim, it's a famous vort, I think it's attributed to many, ask the question, what's so great about his family? They're all a bunch of Ivdei Avodah Zarah. Remember, he smashed all the idols of his father's store. So they're a bunch of Ivdei Avodah Zarah, and you could say that Ivdei Avodah Zarah is the worst sin. The Gimel Avedas that a person is Yohareg Val Yaver. Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayos, Shvichas Damim. You can't get worse than Avodah Zarah. You can't get lower than Avodah Zarah. So why is he saying they should go to my family, a bunch of Avodah Zarah idolaters? But he's not ready to take from Canaan. So the Mefarshim answer a pashta vart, a psychological vart. There's a difference if we talk about ideology. You made a mistake in your calculations. Or we talk about a nature, midos, a character trait. Avram's family had good character traits. And Avram might have gotten that from his father. The people of Choron, where he came from, were not bad people. They just had the wrong ideology. They made a mistake. For some reason, monotheism wasn't the pervasive perception of the world, so therefore everyone served idolatry. When somebody has an ideological mistake, he could be corrected. You just show him the error of his ways. You understand? You made a mistake. I'll show it to you on paper. 2 plus 2 equals 4. It doesn't equal 5. So that's what Avram was doing, spreading the knowledge of the oneness of Hashem throughout the world. And even though people before had no perception of this, but through Avram's being a very good teacher, Avram, he was able to bring the deepest concepts, the highest concept, and bring it down. No problem. But when it comes to a character trait, if somebody's a schlechter Mensch, if someone's a bad person, then it's much more difficult to change. The Friedrich Rebbe describes in the Maimorim of Drushe Chasna Tofesh Peites, see there how he discusses what does it mean a schlechter Mensch. It's pretty harsh the way he describes it. But I guess he wants to show that in every single one of us there's some subtle form of that. You have to always be on guard. But getting back to over here, Avram knew, as von sein Mishpache, it don't mean this Tevis. And therefore he wants to take a daughter-in-law that comes from his family, which has good character traits that are embedded in the DNA. So this Rashi is so unbelievable. And it sets the tone for the whole story of this week's Parsha with Ach B'Goy L'Chalak HaSaretz. And the same thing next week's Parsha, it also talks about the land and how the land was divided. And this comes now as another lesson. We'll get back to the lesson we're talking about now, but one more lesson. And this is talking about chinuch, and this is talking about the 3 weeks. What do we see by this mitzvah of the halachas of inheritance, hilchas nachlas? We see that it came about because they said, why should our father miss out? Like we mentioned before, Lama Yigara Shem Avinu. That means they felt a void. As Rashi said, since they were the great-great-grandchildren of Yosef, inside they felt a void and incompleteness if they were not connected essentially with their land, because this is who they are. That's part of the DNA. And the same thing is true. Let's go back to the story of Pesach Sheni, a similar story. Both Pesach Sheni and Baal Loischa and this story are things that originally weren't. Something had to happen. In other words, it wasn't part of the Torah that was originally so-called spoken to Moshe in an explicit manner in any case. And then, because there was the story of the Bnei Slocha, they didn't get any land, so they posed a new question. And the same thing is, like by Pesach Sheni, those that weren't able to bring the carbon. But over here it says, Lo Me'igora, and by Pesach Sheni, the Yidden cried out, Lo Me'igora. Why should we miss out? So the lesson is there has to be a yearning. There has to be a pining. There has to be a longing. Life in Golus is not good. We are a displaced people. We belong in Eretz Yisrael. We belong with the Gula Mitzvah Shlema. We belong with Shleimus Haaretz. Every single Yid in his DNA, like Bnei Slavcha, there's Shleimus Haaretz, Shleimus Ha'am, Shleimus HaTeirah. So Ach B'Goy L'Chalak HaSaretz, every single Yid of every single Shevet had some part of the land linked to the DNA of his neshama. And that's how we have to feel like Eretz Yisrael. And that's how we have to feel like Mashiach. Just like Bnei Slavcha cry out that it's not about real estate. It's about my neshama, my DNA. I'm incomplete if I'm not essentially connected to some part of the land. That's who I am. And the same thing is every single Yid right now in Golus has to cry out, especially during the 3 weeks. That's when the yearning, the Tomo L'cho Nafshi, has to be greater and stronger and more powerful than ever before. So that's one lesson. That the result the success, both of Pesach Sheni that we had of Pesach Sheni and both of Bnei Slavchad were able to get their land because it came following a question. It came following a sense of a void. It came following a sense of a cry, a request. And this is what we have to do one more time, another time, and another time to cry out, Ad Mosai! Especially during the 3 weeks, which is prime time that Yehovcha Yom Meilu Sasan L'Simcha L'Meidim Tevim. Now let's get back to the lesson of Rashi, that it was passed on from generation to generation, and why Avram looked for a daughter-in-law from his family. We have to realize that when it comes to education and our children, so there's certain things that as knowledge, if you learn halacha or shulchan aruch, then you know what to do. So the skills could be taught, rules could be taught, but then there's the way of life, there's a perception, there's a perspective, there's an attitude, there's an approach, there's midos, there's good character traits. There are certain things that you cannot just teach and learn from a book. It has to come from experience. You have to be brought up in it, and you have to be saturated in your home to see such a way of life. If you have a parent that lives everything's elikus. Everything he sees, he connects to the Eibush. Everything he sees a lesson in it. So that his children inherit that. They were brought up with a different pair of glasses, because that was the atmosphere, the oxygen of the house. And there's a story, I'm definitely said this story before because it's one of my favorite stories, but I'm going to say it again. And that's the story of the Mittel Rebbe when he was a child. He was around somewhere between 5 and 10 years old. And it was the middle of the month of Elul. And in the olden days, they had something called leeches. Doctors prepared leeches. They had to capture leeches. Today it's called cupping, I think. It's still being done, even by super athletes and Olympians. Anyways, so these doctors would capture the leeches, and then you'd have to capture them only during the summer, and then they would use the leeches to suck out the bad blood, and this was some sort of treatment, some healing treatment. So the Mittel Rebbe was in the village, where the Alter Rebbe was, and he's a young kid, and he passes by Rabbi Avram Hareife. Rabbi Avram, the doctor, he was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, and he hears and Rabbi Avram Hareife was talking to another couple of doctors, and he hears one of them say, it's already deep in the month of Elul. That means it's coming to the end of the summer, and we didn't yet capture the leeches to be able to preserve them, to be able to use them for the whole winter as a treatment. This is what one doctor said to another. Rabbi Avram Hareife told it to the Bnei Lam. They were talking, and he just said, it's already deep in the month of Elul, almost by the end of the summer, and we didn't prepare the piafkas, the leeches. When the Mittel Rebbe came to his house, and he walked into the courtyard before his father's house, the Alter Rebbe's house, and he saw a bunch of young men, and they were just laughing in a frivolous manner. And the month of Elul is a serious month. We're preparing ourselves for Rosh Hashanah. So the Mittel Rebbe said, "Es ist schon tief in Elul und in der Technik kein Piafkes zu gechelt. Und es ist lacht." He said it's already deep in Elul, and he didn't prepare the leeches, and he's sitting over here and laughing. And then the Mittel Rebbe, gave a whole explanation. Don't forget, he's a child. that leeches represent the idea of getting rid of the bad blood and quieting the lust, the hot passions of blood that can be channeled in a negative way. And El is a time we prepare ourselves for Rosh Hashanah, and this is the whole idea of the preparation of Rosh Hashanah. We have to get rid of the bad blood, and we have to get rid of the lust and the passions for negative things, and to relax our nefesh bahamis, and to channel all things in a positive way for Hashem. Anyways, the Mittler Rebbe said those words. He's a child of between 5 and 10. It made a tremendous impact, and because the people who heard those words from the Mittler Rebbe, they thought that the Mittler Rebbe, the child, had heard these words from his father, and the whole place took it very, very seriously. Meanwhile, the Alter Rebbe got wind. He was told what his son said, and the Alter Rebbe said as follows: Shezeu derech HaBaal Shem Tov. This is the way of the Baal Shem Tov. Hashem kol dover gashmit sichim nimtzein ba'avodah. From everything that happens in life, we have to find a lesson in our service of Hashem. And then the Alter Rebbe said, Mir hab mit dem geharvet und geweitigt. We had to toil, and it was painful, like spiritual toiling. Und bei unseren Kindern ist das schön in the blood, but by our children it's just naturally in their blood. And then the Alter Rebbe finished, Wer es geht in derech HaBaal Shem Tov, v'arav HaMagid, whoever goes in the way of the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, that Masha Zayin HaNitzitz will implant a spark, a soiris, an arousal, and a hergish toiv, and a good feeling in Avodas Hashem, in serving Hashem, loi u'ladayri dayris, for him and for generations and generations to come. Similar to what we saw in this week's Rashi concerning Yosef and Bnei Tzlofcha. And then, Yener Rosh Hashanah, the Hillel Parshas said the following: that Rosh Hashanah, from that word to the Mittler Rebbe of Piyavkes, the beams of the shul were wet with tears, and Simchas Torah, we tore our shoes from dancing with the guarantee of what the Alter Rebbe had said about those who go in the ways of the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid. So here we see a story, a clear story, that when your child's brought up in a certain way, the atmosphere, the oxygen, and he's saturated with the correct midas tevos, like in the house of Avram, or like in the story of Yosef, the love of the land, which goes on from generation to generation, or in the story of the Mittler Rebbe, where the Mittler Rebbe automatically looked at every single thing in life as an expression of Achdus Hashem and as a lesson, that's something that brings him closer to Hashem. So we spoke the connection to the 3 weeks about the land, Eretz Yisrael, Geula, Mashiach, and the yearning. And we could also maybe say that this is also the lesson that it's Shabbos Mevorachim Menachem Ov. So this shows the deepest connection. That there's many different explanations to the words Menachem Ov, but let us now take a very simple explanation that nothing less will make us satisfied, only the Ov himself, the Eibush himself, B'chvoide Ba'atzmoi, will bring the Geula Mitzvah Hashlema take of Me'ad Mamish by us showing Hashem and saying Lomi Gora, Lomi Nigora. This will bring out the response from the Eibishter that will bring the Geula Mitzvah Hashlema take it from Me'ad Mamish, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisborich, your man in Melbourne.